They came with a rumor more stubborn than drought. Jesus is coming, people said, and the rumor had weight because it moved like a current, from door to door, across threshing floors, under fig trees where women sat mending garments. By midday, a thin crowd had gathered in the market lane. Traders paused from bargaining. Children cut through the press with practiced naughtiness, and the old leaned forward as if to hear a flute note. At the very edge of the press, a woman stood, small and white-faced, clutching a bundle wrapped in a faded cloth. Her eyes were the kind that did not hope for spectacle. They hoped for compassion. Hook. When Jesus paused before her and asked, "What do you carry?" The whole market held its breath. The bundle trembled like a thing afraid of being known. Inside lay a son, limp and fevered. The poor woman had sold her earrings and walked 3 days to reach him help, praying that touch could reach where physicians had failed. The healers had given up. The crowd had gathered for curiosity, rumor, for the electric certainty that sometimes a word changes everything. Jesus' face was not the face of a showman. It was the face of someone who listened like a house that keeps a room warm. He asked the boy's name and sounded it like a promise. The mother's answer came in a whisper that had been practiced 100 times for the wrong reasons. Jesus sat. Jesus sat, unhurried. He did not speak in thunder nor call for coins. He folded his hands into a prayer and touched the child's forehead with a gentleness that made the woman's breath catch. For an instant, the market's noise fell away as if someone had covered the world with a soft cloth. Then the boy inhaled, not with the theatrical slam of a stage trick, but like a lamp finding oil, steady, small, luminous. The mother made a sound that was part cry, part laugh, and the crowd shifted as if released from a tight knot. It would have been enough for any one of them. For the mother, it was everything. But Jesus did not move on like a comet. After the crowd's first surge of awe, he remained. He washed the child's brow with water, then sat on a low stone and asked about the home the boy had left, the nights of sitting up, the neighbor who had loaned what little flour they had. The mother answered like a map of losses. Instead of promising more miracles, Jesus promised bread. He broke a loaf and gave it to the child, then to the mother, then to those nearest. This was his method. Heal, yes, then make the hands that were next to the healed hands ready to hold daily bread. Compassion was practical. Mercy had the shape of a meal. People who had come for a marvel stayed for instruction. The boy needed fresh water, a bed not of stone, a neighbor's help with chores. The village had a cloth seller who heard and realized he had grain stowed away for price. An argument, a secret hoard, a small greed. These were the things that nourished drought more than weather. When he saw the woman's small, hysterical gratitude and the way her boy clung to bread as if to hope itself, something in him unclenched. "Take it as yours to give," Jesus said to the man, not an accusation, but with an urgency that felt like warmth. The seller would later say in a low voice that his hands had been heavy with coin and light with shame, but the bread made him a different man. He unlocked his granary the next morning with the same awkwardness a thief must feel when returning a stolen object. The granary's doors creaked open like repentance materialized. People stood in line as the sun made dust golden, not as beggars so much as neighbors claiming each other. That was the lesson the village kept retelling. God's miracles did not cancel the work of people. A miracle softened a heart, but the heart still had to move fingers and feet. Bread without hands is only a story. Mercy without feet is a promise never delivered. Word of the healing reached the governor's steward, who came not to thank but to tally. He expected wonders. He was given bread in a crowded room of people who had stopped asking what the state would do and started doing it themselves. He left with the odd taste of humility and a list of projects folded into his robe. Repair the well pump, mend the roof of the schoolhouse, send the request for the doctor's return. Small things that required tired bodies and civic courage. Months passed. The sun grew. He remembered the way the light veined through the bakery window, how loaves steamed like small hills of hope, how his mother slept without fear for the first time in seasons. He would not remember miracles as loud spectacles, but as a string of small mercies. The neighbor who watched his chores, the woman who braided his hair, The man from the market who stopped measuring every gesture by coin and instead measured by need. One autumn afternoon, a traveler came through, bent slightly with the sorrow of long roads. People asked the traveler to sit and tell of what wonders he had known. He told of a man who had gone among the cities and sat with the hungry and the thirsty, asking not for show, but for ways to make the hungry full. He spoke of a carpenter's son who now walked like someone who expected hearts to be mended. The crowd listened, and then, at the market's edge, they began to act. Not overnight did the village transform. Old habits have weight, mistrust is a cunning root. But as the seasons turned, a culture of tending took hold. Men who had once watched their stockpile grain now helped to build a communal storehouse. Women rotated the tending of the sick. Children were taught the names of the people who brought them bread, not the names of the ones who paid for their toys. And in the quiet of the evening, mothers would say their thanks aloud, not only for the bread, but for the hands that had learned to give it. What astonished many was how small the miracles felt later. The boy, now a teenager, would say he remembered not the miracle's flash, but how his mother's eyes changed, from hollow to anchored, how her hands learned again to fold bread into pockets for neighbors. He fed us where we were thin, she would say, and taught us how to feed each other. The miracle in this telling was less an event and more a re-education of souls. People ask today what made Jesus different from the prophets of old. They point to thunder and plagues, to parables fragrant as fig. Yet those who lived beside him spoke of another marvel. He treated need not as an occasion for power, but as an invitation to presence. He washed feet, broke bread, sat long enough to hear names. He held space for grief and then quietly parceled out the work of repair. Years moved on. The boy married. He learned the rhythm of harvests and prayers. He taught his children to carve their names in the bread trough after the loaf had cooled, a small sign that they would never forget who had shared. The merchant who opened the granary became old, and in his quiet told grandchildren the day he unlocked it, as if it had been the day he had finally unlocked himself. Some would call all of this small, almost too small to make history, yet history is made from the accumulation of small things. A hand that chooses to stay for an hour when no one else will is the seed of a nation that remembers mercy. The villagers kept the story alive, not to boast, but to remind passing travelers that when one person refuses to leave a small mercy undone, lives mend. I, who tell this, stood that day and watched as a child took a bit of bread and handed the rest to his neighbor. The world felt less precarious for a moment, not because the sky cracked open, but because people had learned again that presence is a kind of crackle that cannot be consumed in a single breath. They kept a cup on their table labeled, "For the Traveler," and a mark was made near the gate where men leaving for distant hills stopped to take bread and say a prayer for coming back. The moral is not grandiose. It is that a miracle may be a thing of thunder, but it may also be a quiet scorch on a small soul that wakes the whole village. The miracle in the market was not only that a child breathed, it was that men and women learned to keep lamps lit for each other in the dark. It is a lesson we need when thunder sleeps long and drought turns bodies thin. The world is healed not by spectacular will alone, but by 1,000 hands choosing to stay.